last bullet, though the business really primarily owns the definition of what goes into the tool, because it's the business's processes, or it could be the IT's processes, but IT still gets all the governance benefits. So this isn't going to be a tool that you hand over to a business user and then you wake up a week later and you find that they've created 15 different processes, automating all kinds of things and sharing HIPAA compliant data out there on the internet somewhere. It's a tightly regulated and controlled environment, very important. We've got a couple demos we're going to show you today, just to kind of give you a little bit of a highlight. These are scrubbed versions of actual examples that we've done in production environments with accounting firms, healthcare organizations, and we're not going to show you the sales management one today because there's not enough time, but we'll show you the first two. And so on the accounting, what we're going to show you is a typical intersection where I might be requesting information as an accounting client. The accounting firm may request information, they're receiving that information, and there's a lot of validation and documentation and stuff that's being passed back and forth. It takes a lot of time. There's a lot of challenges with it, on average, and the client experience itself has an impact. So we're going to show you how we can kind of get that from email. We're going to process it. We're going to update Excel spreadsheets to track it. And we're going to kind of show you what would otherwise take multiple people to kind of hand things over. We're going to show you kind of end-to-end automation there. Another in healthcare, for any of the folks on the call that are in healthcare, probably would not be surprising to know that it's very difficult to get data out of EHR systems. That's nothing new. Or you're getting it in Excel spreadsheets or CSV files or something like that. If you're getting it from multiple sources, it's probably not the consistent format, or even if it's EDI, it's inconsistent. And so we're going to show you an example of processing that from email, normalizing these spreadsheets, and then sending it downstream for subsequent processing. A very common scenario that we've been doing for many years. So I guess I'll switch over to Lauren. Anything you want to add while I'm kind of getting the demo straightened up here? Or?
No, if there's a minute while you are doing it, I'll just comment on the third one because it's near and dear to my world of just and every company has sales management and kind of typical situations where it's hard to get the sales team to update a pipeline or take leads from a partner, and so that's an interesting one as well. Again, we're not set up to show that today, but I just wanted to highlight that as an example. And we'll hit a lot of other use cases once we come back out of the demo as well.
Great. So what you see on your screen, we're going to show you. We are now, by the way, we're in an environment where we're in an Azure environment. We'll show you the tool momentarily, but we have a Excel spreadsheet. Excuse me. We have an Excel spreadsheet, and the intent is we need to essentially restrict the amount of records and provide some updates. Sometimes the dates are incorrect. Here we've got about 40 or so, records. So common scenario is to be able to take information that comes in via email and to react to it. So we're going to show you what that kind of a workflow looks like. So we have an email in here, and we're going to do unread, and then we're going to go over to the blue Prism environment, which you see in front of you. And so, it's difficult to make the robot itself exciting. It's kind of like watching paint dry, just have to be honest. But nevertheless, we're going to kind of show you what the tool looks like and how and kind of how the process breaks down, and then we'll show you how it works. So what you see in front of you are a series of tabs, and each of these tabs, you can look at them as kind of individual processes, but essentially what they are is they are a realization of a process that's defined by interacting with various stakeholders and understanding what they do from a day-to-day business function standpoint. So starting with getting a file from email, opening up the Excel file, updating Excel file, eliminating records, eliminating white space, and then sending it on downstream. So I'm going to actually just go ahead and run it and show you what that looks like. If you see on the left here, you'll see I've got an unread email on that side. And so just to kind of show you that we've got some real live stuff here, we're going to go ahead and go up to this point. I'm going to tell the robot to run to this stage, and you'll see a change there. Just a second. And while it's doing that, for what it's worth, you're seeing a kind of an interactive environment. So this is, think about it for developers or familiar developer tools. This is a design and debug mode. So when you run it in operational environments, you're not looking at this. But for the demo, we're going to show you. So you can see the unread email was actually read. And as we step through it, I'll try to zoom in here a little bit for you. You can see per Blue Prism, I actually have the file. It's in essence available to me now as part of the process. And so then what I'm going to show you is once we have that, we go through a separate process where we make a series of decisions on whether we want that information in that spreadsheet before we process it downstream. And so I'm going to go ahead and let it run, and you'll see how that works. So you can see it's going pretty fast. I'll slow it down a little bit here for you. So you can see right now, it's actually going through. And if you can see there where it says source file collection, you can see it's actually reading the individual rows. You can see the rows being decreased. To give you some context, with the logistics company we mentioned, they may have one particular set of files that they audit 26,000 times. So there's people that literally go through a single record of every single spreadsheet, look at it, provide an audit, if you will, reprice it, and that goes 26,000 times, and it takes weeks to go through that. This individual assessment, what you're seeing right now, where the robot has rules, knowing how to process it, that takes a human decision. Could take 15 minutes to maybe a couple hours if there's questions. We put the knowledge into the robot, and you can see right now, even on kind of a middle pace, we're going through each one in maybe just a few seconds here. So I'm going to speed it up so we don't have to sit there and watch that the whole time. All right. Paint's drying. And it's going to go through it. And then before that, I'm going to show you how it actually writes to the Excel file, just like an individual would. So here we go. Now we've got an Excel file that's popped up here. So you can see it's empty right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how it actually writes it. So it's already determined that I've got a few rows from that original 40. And now you'll see that it's actually writing it out to that Excel spreadsheet. Now, I realize that's not, from a demo standpoint, that doesn't feel like a magical thing that just occurred. But imagine, if you will, as a very, very simple function within any business of just doing a lot of data entry, data migration, updates, normalizing information and so forth, where there aren't sophisticated tools in place. There's a lot of other ways you could attack this problem, ETL tools, Microsoft tools, and so forth. But we're looking at something that you can get into a production in a highly rigorous manner, into production in a matter of maybe days to weeks, and have something that can be highly scalable. So I'll kind of move on from here. The next step of this process is it's going to take that information and then it's going to send it to a third party via email. That's going to come back to us again, and then it's going to put it up to a cloud environment for storage. So it's orchestrating really across 5 different systems, which otherwise requires literally 5 or so different people to orchestrate it. So I'm just going to let it run quickly here, and I'll show you that we're going to get an email notification, and then we'll move on to the next process. Okay, so you can see we got that email came in, and we'll let it finish up here, and then we'll just take, probably in the spirit of the time here, we'll take maybe just 1 more minute to show you the other process, and then we'll move back to back to the presentation. So sometimes in the cloud environment it takes it a second, as you can see here, but just a minute. While that's continuing to run, what I'll show you is a similar example in the accounting space, or if there's anyone that works with accounting firms or from accounting firms on, the idea of what's provided by a client is a very, very common thing for both law firms and accounting firms. And I'd say, Lauren, probably 80% of the market still uses very much Excel spreadsheets to coordinate that activity.
And email.
Fair? And email. Yeah. So you could say, well, listen, let's get off email and let's get off Excel spreadsheets and let's build a tool, or let's find a commercial tool. Those are viable alternatives, if you will. But what RPA provides is an ability for you to respond to the business and say, hey, we're not going to change how you do it today. We're just going to make it where we can automate as much of it as possible. And so what this example is it provides an ability to request information from accounting firms or clients and to process it from there. So I'll just do one very, very quickly. Again, in the spirit of time. So we're going to assume that I've got a tax return that I sent over, and I want my CPA to receive and process that tax return, and I want to be able to track it. So if we go to this Blue Prism process you see in front of you, I'll show you what this looks like real quick. Excuse me. Okay. All right. So we're getting the email. And again, let's give it just 1 second. Looks like it's having a little bit. There it goes. So you can see it's got the email, and I'll just kind of show you how it's going through a decision tree here. So we're looking for the client. We're going to match the attachment, and you'll see right there it went ahead and matched from that email. It matched the tax return, and in this case, all we're doing is we're just going to send a confirmation back to the person who sent the information, and then it's going to complete the rest of the process. So in the spirit of time, we won't go much deeper than that, but just as a very common workflow, which every accounting firm does to some degree, and you're talking, hours and hours spent for every single engagement with every client, can be very substantially automated in a simple manner that we're showing you here. This is a demo, but we have production examples of this that are in place and providing that value. So I'll pause there for a second, and we'll move on to the rest of the deck. Lauren, if you want to add anything else before.
Yeah, one comment as you're switching over, and I think we're now going to dive deeper into some of the business case and how to think about the value behind this. But using that as an example, we've probably all lived in situations where we're looking for data input or information for somebody on our team, from a client like here in the audit case, or just onboarding new customers. And the foundation of this automation is, of course, automating that and driving efficiency. The point I want to make is beyond that, again, from personal experience, is, information gets lost sometimes. You miss an email, just the wait time of going back and forth and kind of lost cycle times. But point being, as you kind of peel the onion, getting basic efficiency is the starting point, but then increasing quality as an organization, which translates to better speed, better nimbleness, and ultimately better customer experience. Those are all things that increase the kind of the value chain of what we're talking about here.
Great, thank you, Lauren. And just before we jump over, I thought it'd just be good to maybe just show you a little bit more of the tool for just a moment. So again, this is a much deeper discussion, but just know that pretty much every tool in the market today, and this is Blue Prism, of course, you get dashboards to do, kind of load balancing, if you will, looking at your throughput and all the different dashboards and metrics to know how the actual, the digital workforce is performing. And what we showed you there, you can see here, we've got schedulers, you can set up different work queues and things like that. And there's a lot you can do. So for example, if you had 3 robots that were running on, say, 5 or 10 different processes, they can intelligently distribute their workload to work on priorities, or have it be driven by a schedule. So there's a lot of additional things you do, and a lot of sophistication in the tools themselves to direct their workforce to being able to do that. Great. So we'll go back to our presentation. All right. And certainly as a follow-up offer, we're happy to go deeper into the tools and things beyond this conversation. But in the spirit of trying to keep it to an hour, we'll make sure we kind of give you an overview and continue from there. Just to give you a little bit of research, of kind of where the traction is for RPA. We're seeing it being very heavily adopted, especially in professional services. And for reasons, that professional services are obviously very much a human economy, very much human driven. So that's both of a concern and an opportunity for professional services. And we're seeing some significant adoption there. You can see McKinsey's report that, 60% of all occupations have 30% of constituent activities, et cetera. Point is that it's not so much a matter of, we're not going to automate everybody. We're not going to automate everything. It's finding what makes the most sense to try to automate across those functions. We're going to pull up a kind of a case study of ours that we thought we'd just kind of highlight to kind of give you some actual, ROI and benefit. So in doing this in healthcare, for example, there was a team, about 100 FTEs doing claims processing, and we found that a lot of the actual claims were being processed either incorrectly or not at all. And so by introducing, robotic process automation, we were able to turn that around. The claim is we did about 8 million in 8 minutes, meaning we found 8 million in claims and running the robot for 8 minutes. Just kind of give you an example. Could be other strategies to solve that particular problem as well, but this was something we got into production very, very quickly in a very rigorous fashion. And everything we sell: spreadsheets, EHRs, green screen applications, access databases. Trying to find an integrated solution for all those things in a timely manner would have been very much a challenge. So that's one. We do a lot in accounting, as we mentioned. So we do a lot among the big four and also the top 50 firms. So we're not at liberty to disclose this particular firm. We're able to take a lot of financial statement processing, significantly down from many weeks to a matter of just a few days, example. And that's a common thread we see among accounting firms, which is helping transform the back office functions along finance, along operations, and so forth, so that the front office can better perform, so that engagement leaders can better understand where they are. And RPA is being heavily adopted, again, among professional services firms, heavily to provide that value, really top to bottom. We're also currently in the midst of deploying robots on the front office, which is to close the loop with how they interact with their clients and providing artificial intelligence and things of that nature. So we're seeing some additional activity there as well, which is in some cases, I don't want to say ironic, but kind of traditional industries have been a little bit more immune to technology disruption. I think this is one of the cases where that's actually occurring, and it's going to have a positive effect in terms of what they can do. Fraud detection among banking, big area there as well.
One comment as you move on, Chad, and you pretty much hit this, but I was going to make the point that if you're sitting there in the audience saying, okay, this is pretty interesting stuff, cool stuff, but does it apply to my business? In addition to some of the examples we've given that are sort of core to what these companies do, as Chad mentioned, the finance thing in back office operations, whether it's invoicing, billing, entering data into your AP system or your ERP system, and or linking all that together, tying it to invoices coming into via email. Those are financial processes and billing processes that almost every company deals with. So I just wanted to highlight that as you're thinking about this, it doesn't necessarily have to be core to your intellectual property. There's certainly some low-hanging fruit that we're seeing across both large companies and smaller mid-market companies just from a back office process. So that's something to think about as well.
Yep. And I'll offer up a joke for the folks that are familiar with the great movie Office Space. If we had RPA back then, we'd be automating the TPS reports, just as an example. So if you're doing anything that you say you have to remind yourself to do something on a daily basis the exact same way, that's going to be a candidate. So we've got some use cases up there in front of you. The swivel seat kind of metaphor, where you enter data into one system, you swivel around, enter it to another system or multiple systems. Extremely common is a big one. Anything that has, if you can define the rule, or if you train a person to do it, then you can teach the robot to do it as well. So rules-based decisions, report preparation, like the TPS report joke, and you see kind of the others there. The idea of what we refer to it as a kind of a virtual system integration, meaning even if you have systems that have available APIs, what we find is you can get there faster in a more reliable manner with RPA as opposed to kind of more traditional systems integration. The more systems you intend to interact with, the more pronounced that is. So if I need to talk to Salesforce, my SAP system, and then I need to go update, maybe some other financial system somewhere, and then maybe HR system, and so forth. To do that in a custom application and drive that kind of traditional integration, it can take you weeks or months, and it's difficult. It's error prone. You're talking about getting there from a RPA standpoint, much reduced time, and once it's in production, you have something that that can scale. So those are some typical use cases. A couple others we'll kind of go through quickly, but just kind of give you some ideas around IT. We're passionate here about technical debt management. We kind of see that in many respects as kind of the silent killer of many businesses in terms of just accumulating technical debt over time. If you're at a point where you're trying to say, I have to spend all of my resources, financial, energy, people, time, everything, to keep the lights on, and you're being asked to drive innovation in something new products or whatever else it is, and you just don't have the ability to do both at the same time, RPA is a way to kind of give a tool back to the business to say, hey, we're going to be able to get that done for you more quickly, while you can spend more energy doing perhaps the more innovative things. So it's a kind of a defensive tool to give you time more back, so you can kind of liberate yourself from that day to day and focus on some new things. You see some other great examples. Lauren was talking about it. You saw some examples around kind of ETL, traditional data management, data migration, data validation as well. Huge in healthcare. That's probably what, Lauren, that's at least half of what we spend our time in healthcare is just management of data and deploying RPA to push that forward.
So one simple thing, I think it's in one of these, just ticket management. We see a lot of cases where from a support organization, maybe wrapped around a product company or IT organization, and you're getting tickets coming in from the customer or from internal QA testing, and you have at least a small team of people just manually entering in tickets around that. Simple things like that are very automatable with this type of technology.
Absolutely. Sales, certainly there's for folks that are engaged in those departments, there's at least 1,000 or more. We've got a good picture of it somewhere of SaaS-based solutions that do every aspect of the sales management process, from reporting, pipeline management, automation, marketing automation, and so forth. You know what? That may not always be the right answer. If you have a heavy investment in Salesforce, and if you need a dashboard that maybe Salesforce and/or your current BI tools can't quite fulfill, you know what? You could leverage RPA to extract all that data out of all the systems, feed that into Tableau or whatever the system you have in place to drive your dashboards, and you've got now a great solution in place to give you better insights. So that's kind of an example.
Another thing that comes to mind across the last two slides, and Jed, this might be something you might elaborate on, but most of the world focused on this type of technology thinks of sort of cost takeout or automating what humans are doing as a primary benefit. Some of these examples we gave here, particularly in the technology world, I think there's a lot of potential to reduce and eliminate the number of systems that you're supporting. So if you have a bunch of custom technology and a bunch of custom code and SaaS platforms and everything else, it's not always the right answer, but there's a potential to consolidate really on this single platform to kind of be your corporate middleware, if you will.
Yep.
But at the same time, get the reporting and the governance and the audit trail and everything out of the box. So it's just another way to think about it as a potential reason to consider this type of technology.
Absolutely. A couple of financial use cases there. Again, we spend a large amount of our energy in the RPA world with finance teams. Again, heavily Excel based. Still a lot of kind of either older accounting systems that are in use, especially across companies that have subsidiaries and they do a lot of financial consolidation. So if you're spending a lot of energy re-entering kind of budget details or actuals and P&L financial statements between different systems and Excel spreadsheets, heavily automated. Absolutely. So with that in mind, we're at 2:45. So I think what I'll do is I'll take maybe just 5 minutes to wrap up kind of a couple of the remaining slides, and then we'll pause 10 minutes for some of the questions. And I know we've got some questions coming up, so we'll certainly answer those. We want to kind of give you a little bit of insights as to what the idea of enterprise RPA is. And so at the end of the day, and if you look at the research and some of the success stories out of RPA, the end game is kind of the beginning. Whereas once you deploy it, that's where in many respects, that's kind of where you start, because that's where you optimize, that's where you extract the benefits. So getting it into a tool and deploying to production, that's not the end of it. So you got to look at it as a kind of a permanent operational fixture to be able to extract those long-term benefits. The same way as you would look at a new hire and have that person fulfilling a function, you think about it the same way. And so when RPA is in production, we like to think about it as you don't have recorders, you don't have scripts, and you don't have intervention. So it's in effect unattended. There's exceptions to that rule, mind you, in sales and things like that where you might need some interaction, kind of like a chat bot or some AI. But when you have these processes that are being executed, you don't want to interfere with them because they should be tightly regulated, compliant, transactionalized, governed by IT, just as you would control access to your SAP systems or other ERP systems for financial records or human resource records. The same is true here. This is very much in contrast to historical screen scraping or scripting desktop type applications that in IT we've all used to provide some basic functions. This is a deployed, virtual robot that you're putting out there that is being executed without intervention. So, and with that, you get the enterprise reporting tools and a lot of rich analytics and details about, what's my transaction performance? If I've got 1,000 transactions a day, how many robots are needed to fulfill the 1,000 transactions? Or if I bring on this new business and I go to 20,000, what do I need for capacity to get through that? Is it 5 minutes a transaction, 2 minutes a transaction? Every business comes to a point where they say, we're going to double our business, or we're going to add, or we're going to scale our business, and we need to add teams to do it. Think about this as a way to not prevent new people from being hired, mind you, at all, but to enable those people to be more productive, so you get greater throughput out of them by taking those kind of low-level functions off their plate. So the reporting enables you to do that. The IT reporting, as you would kind of expect, this is kind of system management, operational management, utilization in terms of CPUs and, is it in the cloud, is it on-prem, and those kinds of things. So think of that as just kind of capacity planning, operational planning, and making sure everything gets executed as you would expect.